Continue with our videos in our psychological statistics playlist. And here, this will be our last video in this module. We're going to talk about data collection procedures and how can we generate, how can we gather data from our participants in order for us to answer our formulated problem. So here goes. Before we go to the proper of the data gathering procedures, or data collection procedures, we need to determine that there are two sources of data that can be considered. One is primary source or primary data, and we have secondary data here. So firstly, when you say primary data, basically, primary data are data where you, the researchers, collected yourselves. So when you control the design of the data collection procedure, even if the work is done by others, you obtain primary data. What we meant by work is done by others, even if the plan are copied off, even if the questionnaire is a standardized questionnaire copied from a different study, but the thing is you are the one who collected those data. It's called primary data. When you say secondary data, this is when you used previously collected data by others. So it was already collected, it was given in a database, for example, for your own use. So, and you will be applying that in your research. We call that secondary data. Okay, so the main advantage of primary data is that you are more likely to be able to get exactly the information you want, because, well, you are the ones that control the data gathering procedure. You are the ones there taking into command, so you are sure that all the variables are put into consideration because you're the ones that gathering the data themselves. Well, with this said, primary data are often expensive and time-consuming to obtain because careful and intricate planning must be done. Okay? So what are examples of secondary data? So data from existing researches, data from databases, data from registers, from records of the city hall or something. Those are all secondary data. And if you want to analyze those secondary data, those data which are given already, so we call that secondary data. So more or less, primary data are the ones which are used in theses and dissertations. Secondary data sets are often inexpensive or more or less free. You might find exactly or nearly what you need. So it depends on you. It depends on the nature of your research, first and foremost, of what you will need to do or what you will need to use: primary data, which is taken from you, or secondary data. Now, talking about primary data, since you will be the one to gather the data yourself, what are the different procedures in gathering data? So, data collection is one of the things which are needed in statistics. Remember, the definition of statistics is COPI. Okay, COPI. Apologies, it's quite laggy here. But you get the point. The first letter there, remember that statistics is a branch of science that deals with the collection, organization, presentation, analysis, and interpretation of data. That is numerical data. So we start first with the C, which is the data collection procedures. So how can we properly and correctly collect data? We have four ways: interview, questionnaire, experimentation, and observation. So we're going to discuss each one of them and try to see their advantages and disadvantages of these different types of collection procedures. So let's start off with interview method. The interview method, as everyone knows, there is an interaction between you and the participant. It is the most important method of data collection, as it will give you the deepest information, the one with the full um, data, the full information that the participant can give to you. So it's the most important. It's the most highly um, recommended type or collection procedure. As I have said, these are the advantages. I have mentioned it. Um, One, clarification about ambiguous or vague questions or answers can be made by the participant or the interviewer, vice versa. And there is more in-depth information that can be gathered or can be unearthed from each of your participant. Of course, we cannot deny the disadvantages of the interview method. It's time consuming. Basically, you need to set up dates, schedules, etc. It's costly because, as an SOP, you should, a thank you is not enough for your participant. You should give them some tokens, of course, because they spend time with you. Respondents as well. Yeah, also one disadvantage. Respondents may be influenced by the interviewer. Say, we have what we call nonverbal cues. For example, um, the participant cannot answer what he wants to answer. Say, for example, you are quite intimidating as an interviewer, so his or her responses may be affected by that. Or, for instance, if the interviewer wears a type of clothes which makes the participant uncomfortable, say your cleavage is out, so and certain things. So those are things which are reality that can influence the answer of the participant. So those are some of the disadvantages of interview method. For the questionnaire method, which is the most used and most abused type of data gathering procedure. Basically, there's no interaction between you and the participant. Just give them the survey questionnaire, let them answer, and they will give it back to you. Whether they answered it honestly, they answered it themselves, or they just scribbled it by whatever lines or whatever. It's really none of your business, and you as a researcher have no idea how or who answered that questionnaire, but you just have this trust language that you answered it with all honesty, even without knowing if that is true. So with all of those, I think those are all the advantages and the disadvantages in a summary. Respondents personally answer the questions on survey forms, or do they? Okay. Advantages: it's less costly, less time consuming, more efficient. No, less time, less costly because you just print it out. You don't need to set schedules. You just print it out and give it to them. Let them answer it. You can survey quite a lot of respondents in a certain period of time, wherein in an interview you need to set a schedule and you need to interview a single person individually or in a group. But even if a group, I think you cannot interview quite a lot compared to what the questionnaire can offer, time saving can offer. Respondents are not influenced by the interviewer because there's no interaction between you, and respondents may answer the questions honestly or truthfully because they believe that they are anonymous, or there is a relative anonymity with themselves. That's why every time when you give a questionnaire, the name should always be optional, unless the name of the respondent is a variable of your study, which rarely happens. So as much as possible, so that the respondent or the participant will be comfortable in answering your questionnaire, always put in the name part, name, open close parenthesis, optional, and then blank. Some disadvantages: if it is not effective if your participant is illiterate. Say they don't understand, their comprehension skills are quite low, which is quite a problem now in the Philippines. So that's not a good way. So they may just, since they don't understand, they may just scribble it in. Okay, I'll just check this. Okay. So those random checking, if they don't understand the question, may affect the results of your study. Okay, always remember that it may affect the results of your study. So it's good if there's only one or two participants. I mean, it's not good. It's okay if there's only one or two illiterate participants. But what if there are 20 illiterate participants, 15, 30, 50? So it will have a bearing on the results of your study. Number two, clarifications about vague questions cannot be made. Hence, you know, we don't know what will happen. If they don't understand, they will just put check wherever. Respondents may misinterpret the questions, especially if your questions are quite vague in the first place. Um, that is why, before we, especially if we are the ones, if the questionnaire is researcher made, we need to go through what we call the process of validation and reliability testing. So validation, you give your questionnaire to experts in the field. So when you say experts, make sure that you you live to that word, experts in the field. Make sure that the validators are indeed um, the ones that are knowledgeable enough to check your questionnaire if they are correct. Reliability is checking for the internal consistency of the answers. So you need to give it to a separate sample. The practice is at least 30 respondents for the reliability, and check if their answers are consistent. It may be one time or two time reliability testing. If it is one time, usually we make use of the Cronbach's Alpha, if Likert scale, and the Kudler-Richardson formula 2021 for multiple choice. If it is a two-time reliability testing, so you can just check the correlation of the pre-test post-test scores, and then you will see if the answers are consistent by checking at their correlation coefficient. That's it for validation and reliability. All questionnaires will go through that if it is researcher made. But there was one that tells that is this from one university where we have attended her speakership in a conference. She suggested that it is not actually enough for the validation reliability. There are different types of validation. There are different types of reliability. So it's not suggested for undergraduate thesis or even master's thesis to create your own questionnaire, because validation, that what we are doing now, like for example lashes or Gooden skates, um, they are not enough to really check validity. There are different types of validity. There's lashes or Gooden skates only measure one. Okay, so it's suggested for you to find a standardized questionnaire instead. Okay, so other disadvantages of questionnaires. So there are quite some technicalities there. Intended respondents may not personally answer the forms. It may request they may request other people to respond, especially if they're busy people, owners, CEOs, or the staff. So you don't really know. You don't really know. And there are low rate of returns, so that's why you cannot rush the data gathering procedure, especially if it is a quantitative research. So you should give it enough time, because your participants may be busy people in the first place. So expect that there is a low rate of return. So that's for the questionnaire. Next is for the experimentation. You may apply this in your experimental psychology or experimental research. So this is a controlled study in which the researcher attempts to understand cause and effect relationships. So we say that the study is controlled in a sense that the researcher is controlling how the participants are assigned to different groups. Okay, so that's why we have quasi-experimental research design, or through experimental research design. So it is controlled by assigning groups, and what treatments to assign for each group. That's why we have a control group and an experimental group, but we are the ones who control that. Okay, and lastly, we have the observation type, wherein mostly in psychology we do that. That's why we have a psychological laboratory, a psych lab, wherein we are observing behavior and attitudes there. So this is observational studies which attempt to understand cause and effect relationship. Unlike experiments, the researcher is not able to control how the groups are assigned and what treatments to use, because you're simply observing and taking down the attitudes and the behaviors of your subjects or participants. So also used for behavioral and attitudinal studies. So that's it for this video, everyone, for the data gathering procedure, especially for the non-probability data gathering procedure, not the sampling technique. But that's the end for our module number 2. I hope you learned something from here, and thank you very much. I'll see you all in module 3. Thank you.